Right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Lisa Plummer. I'm the director of Sacramento facility. I was the director of Bangor for the last year and a half, but there's been some changes. So now you guys probably know Vanessa oversees Bangor. So I wanted to do my teaching on being proactive, the circle of influence and circle of concern. I don't know if any of you have heard of this. It's actually from a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It was written by a Dr. Stephen Covey in 1989. So the book isn't new, but the concepts are amazing and really, really awesome for recovery, but really just awesome for people in general. If you haven't read the book, I recommend it. It's not a big book. It's not a difficult read. He has gone on, and his concepts have become part of college courses. He has a book about highly effective habits for teens, highly effective habits for leaders. So that's where this information is from. All right, so today we're going to cover just basically what it's about, an overview, freedom to choose, being proactive versus reactive, and the circle of influence and circle of concern. And then I want to tie that in with language and why words are so important. So the first thing that I want to share with you is that this book has 7 habits of highly effective people. We're really focusing on the first habit, which is being proactive, but I did want to give you the overview of the other habits in his book. So habit 1 is focus, be proactive, focus and act on what you can control and influence instead of what you can't. The second habit is begin with the end in mind. And this is a habit that says you define clear measures of success and plan to achieve them. I'm sure you've all heard people don't plan to fail, they just fail to plan. Having a plan is really, really important and really part of being proactive. The third habit, first things first, and that's prioritizing and achieving your most important goals instead of always reacting to urgencies. Habit 4 is win-win. And this is about collaborating or having collaborative relationships, meaning relationships that you are interactive and take feedback from people. The 5th habit, seek to first to understand and then to be understood. So a big part of being successful is really wanting to understand other people's perspective. Often we listen to respond, right? We don't listen to understand. And so that's a really, really great skill. And remember, all of these are goals, but these are lifelong goals for a lot of us. We don't always achieve these things, right? These are things that we're constantly working on and working at in our lives. It's a, what do they say? It's a marathon, not a sprint. The 6th habit, synergize, and this is about developing innovative solutions that leverage diversity and satisfy all key stakeholders. All that means is cultivate opportunities with people that are different than you. And then also the 7th habit is sharpen the saw. This is about increasing motivation, energy, work-life balance, and making time for renewing activities. So what we're going to focus on today is the very first habit, be proactive. All right. Before I jump into that, I want to talk about the freedom to choose, and I want you to think about a quote. And the quote is, I am not a product of my circumstances. I'm a product of my decisions. I am not a product of my circumstances. I'm a product of my decisions. And that's written also by Dr. Stephen Covey, the author that I'm teaching from. So one of the things that he talks about, we'll come back to that quote later. One of the things he talks about is freedom to choose. So I want you guys this picture. And what he believes, and I think is a really powerful concept if we get this, is that there's a stimulus and a response. right? There's a stimulus and a response. This happens in everyday life. Someone says something to me, that's the stimulus. I say something back, that's the response. We often think that our response is automatic. You say something rude to me, I'm snapping back at you, right? You push me, I push you. You're nasty, you got a nasty attitude today, so do I. We don't realize is that in between the stimulus and the response is freedom to choose. And what Dr. Stephen Covey says is that is where our power lies, because we actually get to choose our response. Now, when we're kids, we don't think this way, right? We do what our parents did. We do what the people in our lives did. But when we get older, we recognize that we are not them and that we can choose differently. And so the power is in that space, being able to choose. So if you say something nasty to me, I don't have to have the same response. I actually have as much time as I need in there before I respond. And so I can think about something, I can make a decision, I can think consequences through and decide what my response is. And so in that is where our power is. He also talks about that there's 4 unique human gifts and that we all have these, and that this is where our where we draw from when we're making these decisions. So those human endowments are self-awareness, imagination, conscience, and independent will. And then again, here's the quote: between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. In those choices lie our growth and our happiness. All right, why do we react the way we do? So in that space, there's something that comes into play here, right? And if we're more aware of these things, then we can make better decisions. So why do we react in that way? Well, according to Stephen Covey, he believes that we all have self-awareness, we all have imagination, conscious or independent will. And if we don't, and if we aren't tapped into these things, then that's something to take a look at, an area to work on. So I'm going to go over each of them. Every human has 4 endowments. Again, self-awareness, conscious, independent will, and creative imagination. And these give us the ultimate freedom, because that's what gives us the power to choose to respond to change. So the first one, self-awareness. We know from research that when we see ourselves more clearly, then we are more confident and more creative. And that means seeing ourselves in the reality, right? Our shortcomings, our strengths, but being self-aware and seeing ourselves in a clear way. So research again shows that when we see ourselves clearly, we're more confident, we're more creative. People who have better self-awareness make sounder decisions, they have stronger relationships, and communicate more effectively. We are less likely when we have self-awareness to lie, cheat, and steal. Isn't that amazing? We are better workers, and people that have more self-awareness get more promotions and are more effective leaders. And this is proven by research. So what is self-awareness? Well, basically, in psychology, there's 2 types of self-awareness. There's the internal self-awareness. And what this is how clearly we see our own values, passions, aspirations, how we fit into the environment, how we see ourselves. That's internal self-awareness. Okay. There's also external self-awareness. And this is recognizing how other people see us, right? So people who have that self-awareness, meaning they know how they show up in a space. I know what people think of me when I come into a room, for the most part. I have self-awareness. I'm going to give you an example. I worked for years in education, and I was much younger. And I would attend meetings, and they would ask me my opinion, and I would tell them because they asked, right? So people would come up to me after meetings and say, "Are you okay? You seemed kind of upset. Uh, and I was like, what? I wasn't upset at all. And so I am very self-aware that maybe it's because I'm a opinionated woman, that I can come across as assertive and aggressive at times to people. So I am very aware of that. And so when I'm in meetings, I make a point of when I'm speaking to speak very slowly, to be very positive, because I recognize that how I may come across, right? I can get passionate about things and be kind of excitable. And maybe to some people, it's like, whoa, calm down. So that's in external self-awareness. So both of those are really, really important. The next part of our 4 endowments is imagination. And this is vision beyond senses. So the definition of imagination is the act or power of forming a mental image of something that's not present to the senses or never before wholly perceived in reality. So imagination is something that we imagine. It's something that's not there, right? And this is our faculty that we use to form new ideas, to come up with insights, to have creative concepts. So this is another thing that we should be tapping into in that space when we're making decisions. The other one is conscious. So there's conscience spelled like this and SCIOUS, conscious. They're both from the same root word, but basically inner feeling of voice. And this is what guides us from right to wrong, right? This is that sense of right or wrong. In cartoons, sometimes you see it as like the devil and the angel, right? The good and the bad. And so our conscience is that feeling or voice that guides us, that says, this isn't right. Now, sometimes we've suppressed that feeling, right? We don't pay attention to those voices. And so we may have to learn to recognize those voices and follow them. In TV shows like Disney, Jiminy Cricket was the conscience, right, for Pinocchio. And he was the little voice that said, don't do this, don't go there, go to school, when he was trying to get off course. However, basically, that always let your conscience be your guide is not a bad advice. And what I really think is important is to teach your children to listen to that, right? Teach your children to listen to that conscious, that thing that says, I don't think I should do this. I don't think I should go there. I don't think I should go with this person. That's your conscience. And so that's that feeling between right and wrong. And then there are 5 traits of conscientiousness. Someone who is conscious or is conscientious. And what they say is people that are conscientious tend to be responsible, organized, hardworking, goal-directed, and also adhere to norms and rules. I like to say that I'm a rule follower. I wasn't always like that in my life. I find a lot of safety and comfort in following the rules. And some of you know what I'm saying, but there's structure and organization when we do that, right? If we get out of those boundaries, then there's more consequences. So there's nothing wrong with being a rule follower. All right, the final one is independent will. And independent will is the ability to make choices and act on them. And so I believe I have a little, oh, no, I want to. All right, that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and read this. Independent will is our capacity to act. It gives us the power to transcend our paradigms, to swim upstream, to rewrite our scripts, and to act based on principle rather than reacting based on emotion or circumstance. That is our independent will. All right, there's a sentence in there, transcend our paradigms. A paradigm is basically a typical pattern, or a paradigm can be a standard way of thinking. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. Try not to look at the screen. I want you to think about a scenario, and this is an example of a paradigm shift. And when we're learning things like this, and for you that are in recovery or have been in recovery, what we're trying to do with all of the classes and all of the curriculum, right? Everything is to shift your paradigm, to shift your way of thinking, right? I'm sure some of you who are AA, have gone to 12 steps and like AA or NA, they talk about stinking thinking, right? And so what we're trying to do is shift your paradigm. So I want to give you an example of a paradigm shift. Let's picture that you are on the bus, on a train. You get on there, everybody's sitting there, on their way to work, on their way to home, whatever. On comes a man, 3 or 4 kids, and they are absolutely disruptive. They are throwing things, they're loud, they're running around, and he's just sitting there, closing his eyes, just totally disconnected. You start to get irritated. Now he's actually disrupting other passengers, grabbing their newspaper. This is bothering you. The guy's just sitting there while his kids are running amok, right? So you say to him, sir, your kids are actually upsetting people on the bus. Do you think you can pay attention to that? And he says, we just left the hospital. Their mother just passed away. Sorry, I don't really know what to do. That's a paradigm switch, right? Because now we're looking at that situation in a totally different way. Are we going to have a little compassion to this guy? I hope so. A little difference in what we're seeing. Nothing's changed. The situation is still the same. It's a shift in our thinking that changed the situation for us. That's a paradigm shift. All right, let's talk about proactive and reactive. Being proactive. I'm sure you guys have heard these words before. Being proactive is anticipating, acting in anticipation of future problems, needs, or changes. So we are proactive. We don't wait for something to happen. We see it happening and we address it. You think ahead, working in advance, a thoughtful reaction. If you think about going back to our little picture, right, of the stimulus response, the space and the response, if we're thinking ahead and working in advance, then we can be more thoughtful rather than feeling like we have to make a decision right now. So that's a benefit of being proactive. Another benefit of being proactive is being proactive people focus on what they can do and what they can influence. And we're going to talk about that more when we get to circle of concern and circle of influence. Being proactive is about taking responsibility for your life. Proactive people recognize that they are responsible, not just responsible, but response-able, right? Able to respond in an effective way. They don't blame their circumstances, conditions, conditioning, upbringing for their behavior because they know they can choose it. That is being proactive. A proactive person uses language like I can, I will, I prefer. That is proactive language. Proactive people focus their efforts on their circle of influence, and we're going to talk more about that. They work on the things that they can do something about. Our own health, our children, problems that come up at work, in our families. We focus on, proactive people focus on things that they have power to change. All right, people who are proactive have greater stability. And once you start being proactive, then there's a greater sense of stability and security in your own life. And we're going to talk more about being proactive. And then let's talk about being reactive. So people who are reactive, the definition is readily responsive to a stimulus occurring as a result of stress or emotional upset. It's marked by reaction. So being reactive, we're basically focusing on things out of our control. Reactive people maintain an attitude of victimization or blame. So in other words, well, that's just how I am. That's just how it is. That's what I've always done. Well, that's how I was raised, right? So I'm just a victim. Instead of proactive, which is I choose. All right. So reactive people are often affected by the physical environment. People who are reactive versus people who are proactive find external sources to blame for their behavior. We all know people like this. Maybe some of us are like this today. Well, you know, the weather sucks. So, or, you know, my wife's got a bad attitude, so I got a bad attitude, right? None of us do that, I'm sure. So basically, we look at what's going on the outside and we let that dictate what's happening on the inside of us. A reactive person uses language like I can't, I have to, only, if only. Reactive people believe they are not responsible for what they say and do, that they had no choice. And we know that that's not true, right? We have a choice. People who are reactive focus their efforts on the circle of concern, and that is an area where we have no control. And so this is looking at things like the national debt and letting it stress us out. COVID, right? Now, there's some things we can control in that, and there's some things we can't. But where are we focusing our energy? And we'll talk more about that. Reactive people respond to short-term inconvenience as they happen, whereas proactive people wake up every day knowing that I choose today. Now, does that mean that you wake up and the day is going to be perfect? Of course not. There's issues in this world, but it's how we respond to them, right? Another example of that is, well, I'm going to hold that one. Let me move on. So that's proactive versus reactive. All right, so why be proactive? Why be proactive? Well, generally speaking, people who stay ahead of the game or being proactive are significantly more successful than those who don't. Are you guys able to see my screen? Okay, I think Sacramento's having problems. That's okay. So acting only when forced. What this is saying is that it seems obvious, but it's better to address things when we see them coming, right? Rather than not paying attention or acting like we don't see what's coming. Then we're going to end up in a crisis situation, and now we're putting out fires, right? So why active? Because you don't want to act only when forced. You want to see things in advance and take care of things when you can. Now, can we see everything coming? No, of course not. But it's better to make proactive moves than waiting for a problem or a crisis and then dealing with that as it happens. It's already too late. So the point here is that when you're putting out fires all the time, then you've waited too long, right? It's already too late. Many times, problems could have been prevented if we had addressed them in advance. And sometimes waiting until these problems are huge or now it's an issue, it's a much harder, more stressful, that limits our options sometimes. It limits resources available to us than if we address those things in advance. So that's the already too late. And then the next part is issues become non-issues. So at this point, being proactive means that you spend more time planning and preparing for your future than dealing with emergencies. Now, that's not to say that emergencies aren't going to happen, right? They are going to come up. However, when we can plan ahead, then we put ourselves in a much better position to be successful than when we're always in that crisis mode. And we know Some people live in that crisis mode. And are you getting anything else done except for dealing with your crisis? No, because now all of your energy is going to putting out fires or dealing with issues, right? Rather than planning ahead, moving ahead, right? You limit yourself when you live that way. The other thing is you can actually, in many times, stop problems before they start. And so you can avoid being in that perpetual state of damage control, putting out fires. All right, let me go ahead and move on. I would love it if we could have some conversation back and forth. I don't know if that's allowed. I don't know. Those of you who've been on this before, are you allowed to give feedback?
I think you're running the show, so it's up to you.
Okay. All right. Well, then I would like to pause right here and see if you guys have any thoughts, any comments. What do you think about the proactive versus reactive? Does any of that speak to any of you? And we'll just spend a few minutes here.
I think being proactive is a good way to live, but it's really hard to be proactive all the time. So
Okay.
I think you need to sometimes being proactive all the time will cause wear and tear on your body and on your family, and that's a hard thing to witness, to see the wear and tear. But also there's a give and take. So it's, if you give enough proactiveness to your family and they give enough proactiveness to you, then you can both wait. I feel that it's like a give and take relationship.
All right, let me explore that a little bit with you. What's your name?
My name is Keith.
Keith?
Yes.
Thank you for that, Keith. Let me delve into that a little bit. So do you think that living in a proactive way is more wear and tear on your body than living in a reactive position?
No.
Right? Because reactive means high stress, right?
Yeah.
Now, when I'm talking about being proactive, I'm not meaning an anxious level of activity, right? I don't mean when we're so worried about something happening that we're out there trying to figure it all out. That is not what I mean by proactive. And so proactive is more having a realistic, not a paranoid or an anxious, but a realistic sense of things. And I think that you would find that it's less stressful when you're dealing with something that's on the horizon and that may be coming, than if you're dealing with it in the moment because now it's a crisis. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I liked the let's see how it's, we have the freedom to choose. The freedom to choose is in my power. And and that kind of is a hard well, it's not hard, but it takes a lot of practice to realize that the freedom to choose how I react is in my power. People, that, well, when he does that, that just makes me so mad. No, you choose to be mad. So once you realize that you've made that choice to be mad, you have to counter that thought with, well, heck, then I could make the choice to not be mad.
Right.
And while that takes practice, that would be a very freeing thing to do.
Right. And although my emotions may react immediately, my response is right. I choose how I respond. Do I have to act out in anger because I'm angry? No. I can choose to take a walk. I can choose to call a friend. I can choose to take a shower. I can choose to go for a jog. What do you guys think in recovery? How would being proactive help you in recovery? Help you avoid relapse, for example?
I think that you're able to see when a relapse may be coming. It's not just an instantaneous thing. You have a tendency to see it on the horizon. And if you can see it, you can deal with it in advance.
Right. And that's empowering, right? Because now you are recognizing those things. You're recognizing those triggers. And also a really good tool for is when you guys are doing family therapy is to talk about those things with your family, right? If you're going home to a spouse or a significant other or a parent, that because they know you. And so they can say, listen, we know that when you stop returning our phone calls, there's an issue. When you start to isolate, there's an issue. So now we're being proactive. So when we see those things happening, this is how we want to respond. This is what we want to do as your support, right? And so everybody's on the same page talking about those things. Very good. All right, let's move on. All right, now we're going to get into circle of concern and circle of influence. Now, the circle of concern is, and this is things that concern you. This is so many things in life, right? We have concerns about our health, our family, the economy. We have concerns about our children, our jobs, right? We have concerns about our recovery. So the circle of concern are things that are of concern to you. However, you have to, in your circle of concern, figure out where is my influence. So let me talk a little bit about circle of concern. The circle of concern includes a whole range of things. A global warning, the state of the economy, the clothes your children want to wear, the organization you work for, all kinds of things. But many of those things in your circle of concern are out of your influence. So if we devote energy to things that we have no influence on, then it's wasted energy. So the circle of concern, as you can see in the middle, and then the things on the outside are things that don't concern you. They don't affect your life. They're not issues. They don't concern you, right? We have a lot of concerns. The challenge of the circle of concern, though, is that you realize that some of these things that you find yourself concerned with are outside of your control. They're outside of your control. So it's important to know, is this in my circle of concern, or is this in my circle of influence? So I'm going to talk a little bit about circle of influence. Concord, would you guys mute? Thank you, Keith.
Welcome.
All right, here's the circle of influence. Circle of concern is on the outside, right? Circle of influence is on the inside. Now, these are things that are concerning, but you can do something about them. Your circle of influence is smaller than your circle of concern, okay? Because we can have concerns about a lot of things. A lot of things concern me. But what can I influence and where am I to put my energy? So, for example, I can have a concern about the health of one of my family members. But what can I do about that? Probably nothing. People make their own decisions. Can I give them information? Sure. But is this an area where I have influence, right? People are going to make their own decisions. We can be, like we said, we can be concerned about COVID. That's been a huge issue for years now. What is my influence? Well, I can get a vaccination. I can wear a mask when I go out. What else can I do? Probably not much. Wash my hands, right? Don't go in public when I don't feel well, or go around people that don't feel good. That's my influence. Can I worry? Does it concern me, the state of the world with COVID? Sure. But where am I focusing my energy? Am I focusing my energy on where I have no influence or influence? So your circle of influence are things that concern you that you can do something about. We could say that there is no point in wasting time and energy on things that we cannot control. So clearly, in theory, this is much easier to do than in the real world. And it takes a real conscious effort to do that, to make those decisions. So if we react and we are not thoughtful about our reactions, then we are probably in the circle of concern, which is wasted energy, right? Focusing on your circle of concern is negative. It's like screaming at the TV, right? It's not really going to get anywhere or do anything. Our circle of influence is smaller because this is the area that we can do something about. And so what you will notice though, is the more you focus on your circle of influence, the bigger it will get and the smaller your circle of concern will get. If you focus on your circle of concern, your circle of influence shrinks and your concerns get bigger, right? So proactive people, well, let me just jump back a little bit. It's important that you know how far your circle of influence extends, because that affects your, that's your personal effectiveness, right? What areas can I affect? So reactive people find their circle of influence shrinks. Proactive people find that it increases. Proactive people focus their efforts on their circle of influence and control, things that they can do something about. And what you'll notice is that your stress levels decrease and your happiness increases because now you are initiating and influencing change. Otherwise, if we spend our time in the circle of concern, it's like swimming upstream, right? It's a lot of wasted energy and it's not getting us anywhere. So people have to choose how we respond, focusing our time and energy on things that we have control over instead of wasting energy on things that we don't. All right, this next area here shows the impact. So when we focus on that circle of influence, our influence gets bigger because we're more effective. People trust us more. On a job, you will be seen as someone who is proactive and focused. If we are constantly focusing on the areas that are of concern, but we have no power, then our influence shrinks. So basically, positive and proactive focus on the things that we control has a secondary effect of increasing the circle of influence. So here's a deeper consideration. While there are things that we have within our control, there are things that are outside of our direct control. So on a larger scale, you will become more influential and effective around to the people around you, thus making that circle of concern smaller and increasing your influence. Does that make sense? And what do you guys think about that? Is there any thoughts about or times that you can think of, if I'm focusing all of my energy on things I have no control over, then it often sounds like a lot of complaining, right? A lot of negative talk. We're not being effective. It's just wasted. And so we want to figure out, even in difficult situations at home, for example, or how about in the community that you're living in right now? Community living is not easy. Living with people that you would never choose as friends are now your community members, right? Roommates. And so this is a really good time to realize how these people act, or this situation unfolded, or this person said, do I influence? Where's my influence? And so where can I put my energy in the situation? Sacramento, go ahead.
So basically, you're just saying like I worry pretty much like all day about a whole bunch of things that I have no control over. And it just pretty much brings me down. By the end of the day, I just feel pretty much like drained and
absolutely.
That's kind of when I would just want to numb everything and make it go away with drugs
Sure.
or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But so you're saying proactive focus. Okay. So more, so all I have things outside of my control, it will get, things that I can control, focus just on that, I guess.
Yeah.
And get my circle of influence is bigger.
Absolutely. So sometimes it's helpful, Carmen, if you write these things down. So if you think of a situation that is really stressful, and then think of, okay, in this situation, where is my power? Where do I have influence? And so that's where you focus those things. For example, I had somebody, and Gordon, Gordon's iPhone, I'll come to you in just 1 second. I had someone that I taught this many years ago, and he was on parole, and his parole officer was rude. I'll just use that word. And so he struggled with this parole officer who showed up at his house. He had a bad attitude. He treated him rude. And the question was, what influence do you have over his behavior? The truth is none. Now, what could you do? You could report it to his boss. Sure, that's something you could do and may want to do. But after you do the things you can do, that's it. You have no control over another person, how they act, what they do. And so now that's becomes the part of your circle of concern, not your influence. And so you can say that to yourself. And that's where your power is in that stimulus response, right? This guy's got his own stuff going on. I have no control over him. Let me focus on what I can control, which is getting off of parole, doing the things I need to do. So what he did is he started going to his appointments on time. All of the things that he wanted to do, all of a sudden, his influence with that parole officer became bigger. And there was less concern about his behavior because his behavior changed towards him. So that's a real, like, concrete situation where you could see how you're focusing your power changes the dynamic. Now, does that always happen? No. But what does it matter, right? If you're focusing on the things that you can do. Go ahead, Gordon.
So basically, it's kind of like the yellow bus thing. Don't think about the yellow bus. What you're going to think about is the yellow bus. The more you try not to think about something.
Yeah, that's good. So what are we going to put our thinking on, right? Where are we going to focus our energy?
Well, hopefully on more productive and positive things.
Exactly.
As long as we make the right decisions.
Yep.
And then the whole worrying thing, right quick. There's a guy that I was in Bangor with. His grandma put it, worrying is like sitting in a rocking chair hoping to go somewhere.
I've heard that too. I've heard it, worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but you never really get any place.
I like that one. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I know this is a concept in theory and it's like, yeah, sounds good. But every day, it's not that simple. Well, if we put these things into play, and they're not automatic, this isn't the way we're taught growing up, right? No one in school says, you can get more out of life and out of relationships if you focus where you have the power. But it is something that now that you have a choice to think about, to relate it to your situations. It's helpful sometimes if you're struggling with something to write it down. Okay, why am I upset about this? Where's my influence? Where's my concern? What can I focus on? How am I focusing on areas where I don't have any power? And I'm just now stressed out, wasting my energy, and nothing's going to change in that area because I don't have any influence there. So it's a great concept. And I understand that it takes time. It's a real paradigm shift, right? Like we talked about. These things don't happen automatically. It's a way to change your thinking. So you show up in the world differently and the world responds differently, right? And that's what we want. We want doors to be open for us. We want opportunities. We want things. And so we do have influence on that when we focus where we have power. All right, here's some questions to think about while we're pondering this. Where are you currently spend the majority of your focus and time? Do you focus on things that you don't have any power over, or are you focusing on your area of influence? Are you currently being as personally effective as you can in your life? All of you have made a very, very difficult decision to go into recovery. I mean, as staff, we recognize that. You have chosen to leave your family, your children, your loved ones, your phone, your computer, your TV, right? To set yourself apart for a certain amount of time to deal with your issues. And so you have made a very effective choice. But those choices have to continue, right? You have to continually be thinking differently and feeling and thinking, how can I be effective in this situation? Where is my power here? How do I choose my response? So that's something to think about. Are you being as personally effective as you can be? Because in reality, it's you that's going to benefit from it or lose out from it, right? From your choices. And that's all of us. What strategies or tools could you use to help you focus on things you can control and transform your life? Sorry, 1 second. I need to close this. Okay, sorry. What strategies or tools could you use to help you focus on the things you can control and to transform your life? And so that's going to be really individual. Thinking about situations you're facing today and what strategies and tools can I use? Now, you guys are learning those tools every day, right? You're in 4 groups a day. And so there are tools and strategies that you're using. So the idea is, what strategies and tools can I use in this situation, right? And where I have power. And then what can you do today to expand your circle of influence or to build more positive energy in your life and at work? And we have so many options. So that's something to think about today. What can I do differently in this situation, in this interaction, in my relationship? What can I do to expand that circle of influence? So those are some things to think about. All right, I want to go to, what time is it? All right, I want to go to words. Words have power. Words have power. So I wanted to tie all of this in to words. All right, because a lot of what we say affects our lives, what we say to others, what we say about ourselves. And so you may have heard this, your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. Mahatma Gandhi. And so words have power. So let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, words crystallize or create perceptions about that shape your beliefs, that drive your behavior, and ultimately create your world. We know from research that certain words stimulate certain parts of our brain, right? So the response that we're getting from other people and the way that we think or say the things we say about ourselves stimulates our brain to react in a certain way. I mean, this is physiologically affects. You can raise someone's stress by saying something negative to them. You can, bring somebody up. We've all had that where we've had somebody say something wonderful to us, and then you just walk on cloud 9 after that, right? Like, wow. Or have somebody say something negative, and man, that can just really, really pull you down. So words have power and they shape our beliefs. So language influences thought and actions. We use words to describe things, how to describe ourselves, how to describe others, and this affects how we think and how we act. So it's good to remind ourselves that this powerful influence happens in all situations. And so back to that picture of stimulus, space, and response, The words that I use affect that situation, right? I can escalate something or I can de-escalate it. That's up to me. You know, a lot of us are raised in situations where, well, I need to be respected. They're not going to talk to me that way. But the truth of the matter is, we don't control other people. People can do whatever they want. I can choose whether I continue this conversation. I can choose whether I have a relationship with them. I can choose whether I talk to them again. But I can't make someone do something I want. And so recognizing how I handle the words I use in a situation, it can blow up or it can fizzle out, all depending on my words. How do thoughts turn into actions? Well, every thought we experience creates a chemical reaction in the brain, which then triggers an emotion. So as we engage in thought, it creates a new circuit that sends a signal to our bodies, and then we react. So, sorry, I lost something there. That's what I was going to say. Have you guys heard the saying that you can't keep a bird from flying over your head, but you can keep it from making a nest in your hair? So in other words, thoughts come, right? Sometimes you have a thought and you're like, what? Where did that come from, right? I haven't thought about that in years, or I haven't thought about that situation in years. However, that doesn't mean you need to mull over it, invite it in, right? Analyze it. Sometimes a thought comes and we go, whoa, yeah, that's not for me. And then you go on to another thought. You can't have the same two thoughts at the same time, right? You're thinking about something, the other one goes away. So replacing a negative thought with something else. But recognizing that I don't have power over my thought process, in that things pop into our head, but I don't have to analyze it. I don't have to invite it in. I don't have to take it on as truth, right? And so recognizing that thoughts trigger emotions, especially if we engage the thought, think about it, rehearse it, mull it over, okay? So let's talk, and then like paradigm, thoughts can really, like that paradigm example, thoughts can change how we feel. Let me give you another situation. So I want you to think about this. You are at school and you have a whole pile of books and you are walking down the hallway, already, struggling with carrying it. And somebody walks by you and shoulder checks you, knocks everything out of your hand, and then keeps on walking. What is your first thought? Right? Okay, there's a few, right? Negative thoughts. What the hell? This is recorded, but I don't want to say too much. But right? Oh, no. What? This person keeps walking. You're like, are you serious? What up? Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, what if you turn around and look and you notice that the person is blind? Does that change your thinking about the situation? It does. And that changes your emotion about the situation. The situation is still the exact same. You still got your books knocked out of your hand down on the ground. Nothing has changed except for the way you're thinking about it, right? That's why, and here's another scenario. Somebody comes in and says, oh my gosh, I just got a phone call. Your family was horribly injured in a car accident. You freak out, what's going on, right? You become upset. They come back and say, oh my gosh, sorry, it was an accident. It wasn't your family. It's the same situation. Somebody still was injured horribly in an accident, right? But my thinking about it has changed. So my emotional reaction has changed. So words are powerful. The things we tell ourselves about a situation. And so it's best to recognize that everybody's got something going on. The person that I can't stand how they drive, the person that's rude, right? There's reasons for all of that. I have no power there. My power is in how I respond and react. Because ultimately that will affect my life and the influence I have on things around me. Let's talk about language. So some examples of proactive language are I can, I will, I prefer, I choose, right? Reactive language, there's nothing I can do. Well, that's just how I am. Well, I have to do that. Well, I can't, I must, right? That's giving your power away. That's that victimization. Well, it's raining outside, so I'm in a bad mood. That's allowing outside influences to affect us. So examples of positive language, people who use reactive language, reactive language that I can't, I have to, believe that they are not responsible for what they say and what they do. They have no choice. Proactive people focus on their efforts, on their circle of influence, and recognize they do have choices in every situation. Proactive communication is communication when you prevent problems rather than always trying to fix them, right? If we're just always fixing problems, that's reactive. If we're seeing things coming and taking care of some things to avoid those issues, that's proactive, right? Dealing with issues before they come up. All right, I want to go on to that saying that we started out with, the quote I asked you to think about. I am not a product of my circumstances. I am a product of my choices. I think that really sums up everything we've talked about, how we make choices in our responses, how we have power in those moments, how we can tap into those 4 endowments of our imagination, our independent will, right? Our self-awareness, all of those things that allow us to make better choices, how we can influence people around us and have more influence focusing on things that we control. I would suggest that you, like I said, if you are having a difficult situation, drawing out that picture. Where's my concern? Where's my power? And what can I do to focus on it?